Good morning. Well, hold on. Why is everybody laughing? I'm not. Oh, okay, hold on. Let me go ahead and address the elephant in the room, okay? How ironic was it that last week Eric kicked the series off talking about the Grinch? Am I right? I mean, they're almost identical, right? Is that what you're talking about? It's crazy. No, in all seriousness, look, I understand that I'm a grown man standing up here in an elf costume, right? But I absolutely love this time of the year. It's one of my favorite times of the year, and for a couple reasons. The first is that when we were talking about this series, me, Corey, and Eric, what we were trying to do is we were trying to figure out a way to make sure that we put joy back into Christmas, to make people excited about the Christmas season. The second thing is that I absolutely love movies. Me and my dad used to go see movies all the time together when I went and stayed with him on the weekend, and that was pretty much our thing that we did. So I love movies, and I also love Christmas, the Christmas season. I love pretty much everything about it. I love the smells, I love the movies, I love the time with family, I love the music. How many of you will listen or love Christmas music? Oh, okay, more than I thought. I love Christmas music. I could listen to it all throughout the year. And so because of that, I also love Christmas movies, specifically The Elf. It's hands down to me the greatest Christmas movie of all time. Now, you may not agree with that, and that's okay. We can agree to disagree and still go to heaven. And honestly, it may make my top 10 movies of all time. I love The Elf. There's so much there. Now, I'm curious, how many of you, I'm going to do what Eric did last week, how many of you have never seen the movie Elf? Okay, all right, well, you can be expecting some coal in your stockings come Christmas time. In all seriousness, if you have a chance, I would highly recommend watching it. It is so fun, full of joy. But here's the deal, if you haven't seen it, the movie is about a man named Buddy the Elf, and Buddy the Elf lived in an orphanage, and when he was a little baby, Santa came to visit his orphanage. Well, when Santa came to visit his orphanage, he was eating cookies, doing his things, putting the presents out, and Buddy got out of his crib, and he crawled into Santa's bag. Well, Santa didn't know it until he got to the North Pole, and when he got to the North Pole, here comes crawling out this baby, and he's like, oh my goodness, what do I do? But what we find out in the movie is that he actually loves babies, so Santa basically adopts Buddy, and he raises him in the North Pole. And so Buddy grows up, and he's raised by elves, but he starts to realize at some point that I'm a little different than these guys, like a lot bigger different in many ways. I don't produce toys the same way. I don't look the same. And so Papa Elf pulls him aside, and he says, listen, Buddy, I got to tell you something. Shocker, you're not an elf. You're actually a human, okay? This freaks Buddy out, and he's like, what do I do? And he's like, listen, your dad lives in New York City, and he works for a children's book company, produces children's books. So what Buddy the Elf does is he says, well, I'm going to go, and I'm going to find my dad. And so he does, but when he gets to New York, it's a lot different than the North Pole. Check out this video. I mean, it is hard to watch that and not smile and not laugh. Now, I know some of you may not prefer Will Ferrell, so maybe you haven't seen the movie because of that, but it's hard not to watch that. It's hard not to look at this ridiculous outfit. I know it's ridiculous, I promise. And it's hard not to crack a smile, to experience an overwhelming sense of joy. I know for myself, when I watch The Elf, it just reminds me of this time of the season. And again, I absolutely love Christmas time. I love thinking about being able to go around and drive with my boys and show them Christmas lights and them just get all excited, to be able to give them gifts so that they open them up and again, experience this overwhelming sense of joy. I love Christmas music, all those types of traditions. But it also brings to mind things that we get to celebrate. Specifically, the most important thing being the birth of Jesus. It's an incredible story, and there's two interactions specifically that happen in this story that we see where joy is put on full display. I love the Christmas story. I can only imagine the sense of joy that Mary and Joseph had when they see baby Jesus, but the interactions that the shepherds and the magi have are incredible. They're amazing. Now, maybe you aren't familiar with the story of the birth of Jesus for whatever reason, and that's okay. But here it is in a nutshell. So God sends a couple angels to both Mary and Joseph. He sends one to Mary and Joseph first, and he says, and he tells him what's going to happen. But Joseph freaks out. This whole idea freaks them both out a little bit because they're like, Joseph's like, we're not married. This could mess me up. People could look at her bad. I don't want to do this. I may not stick around. I'm not even sure if I want to follow through with this. But the angel comes to him and says, listen, relax, settle down. This is from God. It's okay, I promise. And this is what an angel says to Mary. He comes to Mary and he says, do not be afraid, Mary. You have found favor with God. You will conceive and give birth to a son, and you are to call him Jesus. He will be great and will be called the Son of the Most High. The Lord God will give him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over Jacob's descendants forever. His kingdom will never end. But Mary's response is fantastic because she doesn't immediately say, oh, this is incredible. I get to give birth to the Son of God, the one that's going to save the world. No, it's something a little different. This is what she says. How will this be? Mary asked the angel, since I'm a virgin. So Mary's like, angel, let's talk. Here's the deal. Me and Joseph, we haven't even birds and bead yet. So how is this even possible? So she's freaked out. But the angel says, listen, relax. It's okay. This is from God. So both her and Joseph, they're settled down, and they get this news, and they go ahead and they pack up, and they leave Nazareth to head to Jerusalem, to Bethlehem, and they finally get there, and they get settled in. But on the way, of course, they travel for about 4 or 5 days. It's a long journey, super pregnant. I'm sure some of you moms out there can understand how miserable that is, but I like to sympathize with Joseph and think that it was also difficult for him, too, to deal with a pregnant woman traveling across the desert on a camel. I'm sure he's like, I love Mary. I love Mary. I love Mary. Lord, what were you thinking? So I like to sympathize with him, but they finally arrive. They get settled in, and shortly after, there's this joyous moment where Jesus is born. It's incredible. And so an angel appears to some shepherds in a field nearby, and this is what he says to them. It says, do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. Today in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord. This will be a sign to you. You will find a baby wrapped in cloth and lying in a manger. This is the first joyous moment that we see. Everyone was full of joy. And so the shepherds hearing this, they say, well, we need to go see baby Jesus. This is incredible. So they go and they visit baby Jesus and they praise and they worship him. They go throughout talking about Jesus and the fact that he's here. And then shortly after that, we experience the second moment. It was with the Magi. So some Magi come from the east to Jerusalem, and they're looking for baby Jesus, and they go to Herod and they say, listen, where is this Christ? Where is this baby? We must see him. We want to worship him. And Herod's like, oh, well, this first I'm hearing about this. Who is this? The problem was the Magi were going to worship Jesus. King Herod hears about this Christ and has a complex and is like, I got to do something about this. So he asks them to go spy and find out where he is so that he can go worship. But in all reality, he wants to go and he wants to kill this baby. So the Magi, they take off and they go look for baby Jesus. And this is what it says in the book of Matthew. It says, after they heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were over... Let's try that again. They were perfect. They were overjoyed. Great job. You did better than all the rest of these guys. They were overjoyed. The Magi were thankful. As a matter of fact, when they get to Jesus, they bow down, they worship, they give gifts, and they actually even warn Joseph and Mary, and they said, listen, you need to get out of here because the king is trying to kill your son. Again, it's hard to not look at this, to not think of this story and to celebrate. What an incredible time of the year. There's so much joy and abundance and an overflow of joy. But it's not just a time to celebrate the birth of Jesus, but it's also a time to celebrate the fact that we have an opportunity to bless our community. If you guys remember, we've been talking a lot about the gift over the last several weeks, and we've been collecting money. And just yesterday, me and several students and some of our coaches, here are all their beautiful faces, super proud of them. We got together, we went to Walmart, we took the money that we raised, a little over $3,500. It was incredible. Thank you guys. It wasn't possible without all of you. Yeah, you can clap. Here's somebody clap, please. And so we had an opportunity to go to Walmart to buy these gifts, chaos and insanity all over the place. We came back. If you show the next picture, it gets a little wild in there too, so this is all of them rapping. We just have an incredible time doing this. But what's even more special is when those families come to get their gifts. And it's like every year we can expect that this is gonna happen, but these families come in to receive these gifts, and they're just, again, overwhelming sense of joy starts to take over. This one lady came in and she just saw the gifts is all she saw, and I could already start to tell that she was just overwhelmed. But then we also like to give each family a $100 gift card to Safeway. And so I handed it to her and I said, hey, this is what this is. We would love for you to get some groceries so that won't be a difficult thing for you. And then she just busted into tears. She was so overwhelmed with joy, and we have an opportunity to see that each and every year. Christmas time, this time of the year, is such an incredible opportunity to experience joy. When this, again, elf, this ridiculous suit, Jesus being born in the world, the gift, that baptism, which was unbelievable to see that story. Congratulations, that's amazing. And let's clap for that one more time, please. These gifts are so amazing and an opportunity to experience joy. And I know for me, it comes natural. I love it. It's so easy to look and to see and experience joy. Unless it's not. Unless it's not easy to experience joy, because maybe some of you are thinking, Joe, I actually wish you would take that ridiculous outfit off. Not because you look funny in it, but I can't experience joy. Joy is not an option for me this time of the year, because for whatever reason, in the past, something has happened, or maybe you're currently going through something that makes it feel like you don't want joy. Not just that, but you can't have joy. Something has happened in the midst of your life recently, in the past. Maybe you and your family, maybe you were trying to start a family, and things were going fantastic. Things were going well. Everything seemed to be in order. And you get pregnant and you have names picked out and everything, and you can't wait, all this excitement. But then all of a sudden, something doesn't feel right. You're like, I'm not really sure what's going on, but something doesn't feel right. And what you realize is that you've had a miscarriage. And so you're thinking, hold on a second, Joe, you want me in the midst of this, in the midst of the hurt and the pain, to experience joy? I think you're insane, because there's no way that myself could experience joy in this moment. Or maybe your marriage has been so good for so long until now it's not. Maybe your marriage has been going downhill for so long. Maybe your spouse has been cheating on you. Whatever it may be, you no longer love the person that you loved for so long. And the only option that you feel like there is divorce. And so, Joe, you're telling me in the midst of this divorce, in this paperwork and losing my best friend, you expect me to choose joy? I think you're crazy. I don't think it's possible. Or maybe you are experiencing one of the worst illnesses that we face in this world. Maybe you're battling with cancer and the treatments are overwhelming. Chemo after chemo, you can't sleep, you can't eat, you're always in pain. Or maybe somebody in your life is dealing with it. Maybe they got months to live, weeks, not a whole lot of time left. And so, Joe, what you're saying is you expect me in the midst of this cancer, my spouse, my mom, my dad, my sibling, going through chemo, joy? That's what you're asking? Maybe cancer is not it. Maybe your financial situation is so tight that you are living paycheck to paycheck and you feel like you just can't get by. feel like you're working multiple jobs over and over again, and it's just not enough. Maybe you've recently lost a job, and that's why your financial situation is the way it is. Maybe you have a mental illness that you struggle with and that you wrestle with that causes you to feel like, I can't. It's not an option. Maybe loneliness, there's somebody, you don't have anybody in your life that can even help you experience that joy. No one's there to help me. Maybe you recently suffered a death, a loss in the family this time of the season, maybe some time in the past, and you're like, Joe, I can't do it. Joy is not an option. Or fill in the blank. I don't know all of your situations, but fill in the blank. And whatever that is, Joe, that's why I cannot experience joy. But I want to be very sensitive with my next statement. Yes, I may not know what you're currently going through. I may not know your situation. I may not know any of these things that you're wrestling with. I can only begin to imagine, but what if I told you that regardless of your circumstance, that you can experience joy? That you can experience joy. Not only that, but we're actually even encouraged to consider these moments, these dark times, a joyous occasion. Now, I know that sounds crazy, I promise, but check out what James says in his letter. It says, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds. Hold on. You're saying that God expects me to experience joy in the midst of a miscarriage or divorce or cancer. That's what you're telling me? Yes, it actually is what I'm telling you. But how am I supposed to do that? It's a great question. It's actually one that I wrestle with. I remember when I was about 13 years old, my mom and my dad came to me and they said, listen, we need to have a conversation. We just found out that the local authorities, they found the remains of your brother in the woods, and they identified him by his teeth because he committed suicide. He hung himself in the woods. I get it. It's something I've wrestled with as well. How in the world do I consider joy in this? How is it that James says there's this tension? How am I supposed to live in this tension where James says, listen, it's great and it's easy and it's good to experience joy over here when life is good. But it's also amazing and incredible and encouraged to experience joy over here when it's not. How do we live in that tension? Because it's a real tension. I believe the only way to do that is to better understand joy. We've got to better understand joy. I believe we have to have a better biblical understanding of what joy is, how God defines joy. I believe the best way to do that is to redefine joy. Because for whatever reason, whether it's our culture or our family or our past or even our own selves, we've come to understand joy differently than how God sees joy, how God defines joy. And so my goal over the next few minutes is to redefine joy so that you'll have a more accurate, better understanding of what it is. So when you leave today, you're like, it doesn't matter what I'm going through. I can experience joy. It's not easy, but I can do it. In order to do that, in order to redefine joy, I think we have to break down some common misconceptions of joy. So here it is. Here's the first one. First misconception of joy is that joy equals happiness. Joy equals happiness. Too often people equate joy with happiness, like it's synonymous. But the problem is that happiness, this is how happiness is defined. It's this constant state of feeling or showing pleasure. Now, I think it's safe to agree that based on that definition, that none of us in any of those moments or circumstances, or you fill in the blank, have ever one time been happy or felt pleasure in the midst of that circumstance. I think we can all agree on that. So if someone did think the two are synonymous, then it would make sense that they would feel like they couldn't experience joy in those moments. But joy and happiness are two very different words. In all four accounts of Jesus' life, we get a detailed description of all the things that he suffered, all the things he experienced when he went to the cross. And right before he was about to be arrested and this whole process was about to start, he takes his disciples off and he prays with them. And he says this, Jesus went out as usual to the Mount of Olives, and his disciples followed him. On reaching the place, he said to them, pray that you will not fall into temptation. He withdrew about a stone's throw beyond them, knelt down and prayed, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup. Take this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done." An angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him. And being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. Jesus never thought for a second, man, this whole cross gig, it's awesome. I want to do it again. No, it was miserable. It was painful. Not 1 second did he experience pleasure or happiness. Nothing to be happy about. Joy isn't an emotion or a feeling based on pleasure. That's the first misconception. The second one is this, that joy is situational. That joy is situational. I believe that it's too often looked at as an ebb and flow type of experience. When we're up here and life is good on the mountaintop, this is easy. I can experience joy here. That's not a problem. But as soon as things start to get tough and I'm in the valley, it's not so easy. Joy isn't welcomed. It's not here in the valley. I can't experience joy there. But the truth is this, that joy isn't reserved for just the mountaintop, but it's also welcomed in the valleys. It's not meant for just the mountaintops. It's welcomed in the valleys. And Paul modeled this for us actually while he's in prison. In his letter to the church in Philippi, Paul says this about his experience. He says, "It is true that some preach Christ out of envy and rivalry, but others out of goodwill. The latter do so out of love, knowing that I am put here for the defense of the gospel. The former preach Christ out of selfish ambition, not sincerely, supposing that they can stir up trouble for me while I'm in chains, while I'm in prison. But what does it matter? The important thing is that in every way, whether from false motives or true motives, Christ is preached. And because of this, I rejoice. Yes, I will continue to rejoice." The only thing that mattered to Paul was that Christ's name was spoken about, that people heard the message and the good news about Jesus. It didn't matter if he was in prison. Whether we're here or here, joy can be experienced anywhere. Joy can be experienced anywhere. The third misconception ties into the second one, and it's this: joy is occasional. Joy happens on occasion. Later on in the same letter to the Philippian church, Paul says this. He says, "Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again." Let's try that again. "Rejoice in the Lord always, and I will say it again." Rejoice. Thanks, bud. It's not just here. It's not just here. It's all the time. It's across the board. It's in the goods, the bads, the uglies, the highs, the lows. Just on your way to work in the car. It's meant for every occasion, no particular time, no particular moment. It's actually like a piece of clothing that you put on and that you keep on. Joy is like a piece of clothing that you put on and you keep on and it stays there. It kind of reminds me when I go on student trips to a conference or a camp with middle schoolers and specifically, and the boys wear the same underwear all week and never take a shower. Okay, it's a thing, I promise. It happens all the time. It's horrible, but that's joy. Putting it on, not taking it off. You're not going to forget that. You're not going to forget that one. Joy is constant. Joy is constant. This is the last misconception, is that joy can be taken. That joy can be taken. I don't know if you've ever heard it been said before, but I've heard people say, "Listen, I'm not going to let anything or anyone steal my joy." Not happening. And that's a great thing, but the interesting thing is that because I feel like this is the reason people have a hard time with joy, especially in difficult circumstances, because they would hate for someone to take their joy, especially if they try to have it in a difficult moment. I don't want somebody to rob it. I don't want somebody to take it from me. So why would I be able to experience joy in this moment? But here's the reality. Joy cannot be taken from you. Joy cannot be taken from you. John actually tells us in his account of Jesus' life that he says this, "Very truly I tell you, you will weep and mourn while the world rejoices. You will grieve, but your grief will turn to joy. A woman giving birth to a child has pain because her time has come, but when her baby is born, she forgets the anguish because of her joy that a child is born into the world. So with you, now your time of grief. Now is your time of grief, but I will see you again and you will rejoice, and no one will take away your joy. No one will take away your joy. Now, no one thing can take away your joy, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to try. As a matter of fact, that's Satan's MO. That's what Satan looks to do. He feasts on that type of mentality. This is what it says. It says, the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I've come that they may have life and have it to the full. Satan's going to do whatever he can to strip you of that joy, to strip you actually of anything Jesus wants for you, because he doesn't want the same thing for you. Now, some of you may be thinking, actually, joy isn't something I struggle with. I have it to the full, and that's great. I mean, amen to that. I appreciate that. But what I would do is I would challenge you on your understanding and your definition of joy. Because if it's not solid, if it's not a biblical understanding of it, the problem is when life does get hard, and it will, that's life, the reality is, are you going to be able to choose joy? Are you going to be able to keep that joy on and not take it off, even in the valleys? So we've broken down these misconceptions of joy, right? Now, how do we actually define joy? How do we define joy? There's a guy named Rick Warren who has what I believe to be the best and most accurate definition there is of what joy is and should look like. I absolutely love it. And you may be familiar with Rick, but if you aren't, he's an author, and he's also the founder and leader of Saddleback Church in California, which is the 4th largest megachurch in this country. But that's not why I like it. That's not impressive to me. He's just reaching a lot of people, and I love that. He's just a guy. But here's why I like it. Because this is coming from a man who in April 2013 found out that his son had committed suicide. So this is a man who's experienced the valleys. This is a man who's been there. And this is what he says about joy. I love this. Joy is the settled assurance that God is in control of all the details of my life. The quiet confidence that ultimately everything is going to be all right. And the determined choice to praise God in every situation. That is joy. In other words, joy equals hope. Joy equals hope. Joy is an amazing emotion that God established for us to experience so that when things do get tough, we can have hope. Earlier, I mentioned that passage in James, but I only said the first verse. There's a comma. In the second verse, it says this: consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. The testing of your faith produces perseverance. James says, look, consider the trials you face as a joyous occasion, because that's going to test your faith and it's going to help you press on. That means in this moment, whatever it looks like, a miscarriage, divorce, cancer, you're able to take a step back for just 1 second, step to the side, look beyond this situation, and say, oh man, there's hope. God is going to do something incredible with or through my situation right now. That's joy, being able to take a step aside and see that. Joy is an incredible thing. Now, please don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not going to stand here and say for 1 second that you aren't going to experience hurt and pain. I'm not going to say that you're not allowed to or that you shouldn't. That's life. I think we all can agree on that. I'm not saying that, but what I am saying, and what I want you to know more than anything else this morning is this: that joy is always an option. Joy is always an option. It may not feel like it, but no matter what your circumstance is, joy is always an option. But here's the hard part about joy. I'm sorry to tell you this. Here's the hard part. Because it's not a natural feeling or emotion. It's not based on a pleasure or a specific circumstance. And because it's something that's supposed to be experienced regularly, that means it's a choice. That means we have to be willing to choose joy. So, Joe, you're expecting me in the midst of this valley, these things that are horrible, that I'm experiencing all this pain, something I've experienced in the past, something I'm currently going through. You expect me to choose joy. How dare you? You don't know my situation. You don't know what I've been through. Have you ever experienced a miscarriage? Have you ever experienced cancer? No, I haven't. I have not. But I know some people who have. I know some people who have, and I know this, that one, they chose joy, and two, I know that the hope that it provided for them when they did. I have a friend named Melissa. She's actually one of our coaches in the student ministry, incredible woman. I love having her and Luke a part of our team. A couple of months ago, they got pregnant, and they were so excited, but shortly after that, they had a miscarriage. And I remember at small group on Tuesday night, her coming, and it was a little while after. I just remember her sitting there on the couch, just weeping, just sobbing, hurt and in pain, asking questions. God, why? Why would you do this? But I also remember that even in the midst of that horrible situation, that Melissa and Luke chose to look at what God could and would do because of their situation. I actually asked Melissa because I was curious. I said, hey, what did that situation do for you? And this is what she said. It made me appreciate Olivia so much more. They already have one little baby girl. She's 2 years old. It made me appreciate Olivia so much more. I knew God would bless me with another child. She was confident in that. I also knew that I would connect with others that reached out to me who were experiencing the same thing. She said, it's going to allow me to be more empathetic. Now Melissa and Luke are 20 weeks pregnant with another little baby girl. Yeah, please clap. They had hope that God was going to do something incredible with their situation. They chose joy. I know that the woman, one of the most important women in my life who brought me into this world several years ago, came to me and my wife and said, hey, listen, I have stage 4 breast cancer, and I've been battling this and wrestling with this for about 12 years, which is unheard of and crazy. And I was blown away. And what I knew, and what she told me is that this has been super difficult. I know that she had a double mastectomy. I know that she had round after round of chemo. I know that she had to stop working because she was in so much pain and she was so exhausted. But what I also know is that she gained a whole new appreciation for life because she's still alive today, and she lives with me and my wife, and it's amazing to have her around. And she went out of her way on a regular basis when we talk to say, the only way this was possible is because I chose joy. She told me that on a regular basis. That's crazy. I may not know your situation, but I do know somebody, a friend of mine I just ran into last night. She has a couple children who right now are going through some unbelievable things that are making her life a nightmare. We started talking, and she told me about how one of her daughters had stolen her credit card and was racking up hundreds and hundreds of dollars with that. And that her other daughter was in the hospital dealing with some health things because she has been involved in a sex trafficking ring, and she's working with local authorities to get her out of that. But here's the crazy thing. I can only imagine the pain that she must have been dealing with, but I never would have expected that. Not for a second, because her attitude and her demeanor were something way different. She was smiling, looking at me, telling me these things. I'm like, are you crazy? But what she did is she chose joy, and that's the power of joy when you choose to put it on. Joy is always an option. But I'll be honest, I struggled with this message. It was hard because I started asking myself questions like, how is it that I'm going to effectively communicate and redefine joy for everyone? How do I acknowledge this tension of experiencing joy here on the mountaintop and then also here in the valleys? How am I supposed to do that? How do I sensitively wrestle with these horrible circumstances that people have or are currently facing and help them know that joy is an option and they can choose it? Because that's crazy. And it was hard and it was heavy. But as I was studying, as I was reading, as I was trying to listen to God, because I needed him more than ever, the only thing I kept coming back to was hope. That joy isn't based on happiness. Joy isn't situational. But joy is always an option, and if we choose it, it can provide so much hope. And honestly, it put a huge smile on my face. And I came in here thinking this morning, I hope that I say something that will help somebody else feel the exact same way, because maybe they are in the valley and they don't think there's anything else for them. So here's the conclusion I came to. I'll tell you what I don't know. I don't know your exact situation. I don't know what you're currently wrestling with. Life may be fantastic. It may be full of pain and confusion. I don't know how long it's going to take for you to overcome that difficult situation. It may take a long time, may take a short time. I don't know exactly how you're supposed to choose joy, because it looks differently for everybody. But I do know this. I know that joy isn't the same thing as happiness. I know that joy isn't something you experience on the mountaintops. It's not just something here, but it's also here. I know that joy is designed to be experienced all the time. I know that joy is not able to be stolen. I know that Hebrews 12:2 says this, that because of the hope that Jesus had, that there was a way for us to experience heaven with him, he endured the cross. He hung himself on that piece of wood because he knew there was hope for us. I know that you have to choose joy. And I know that joy is always an option, and it's one that Jesus so desperately wants you to choose. Here, all the time. So my question to you is this: when you walk out of here this morning, regardless of what you're going through, and I'm sorry if it's something deep and painful, my question is this: are you going to choose to take this physical representation, whatever that looks like for you, to put on joy and to keep it on? Again, I don't know what you're going through, but I'll tell you one thing I do know is that somebody else needs to know. Don't do it alone. Joy is an option, and I myself and Jesus hope and pray that you will choose it so that you will know there's hope in any situation that you're facing. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much for sending your son to set an example, to model what it looks like to have joy. A man who did it in the midst of being beaten and bruised and hung on a cross, bleeding everywhere. He chose joy, and he chose the cross so that we could experience joy. And Father, I pray this morning that if there's somebody in here who feels like they can't right now or haven't in a long time, that they'll walk out of here and know that they can choose joy, because it's always an option. And then, God, that you will deliver them from that, and you are going to do something incredible with that situation. Father, thank you so much. We love you. Pray these things in your name. Amen.